Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this first ever Double Waved Yellows podcast. I'm Matt, and joining me this afternoon are Hodders and Tyson. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hang on.
So tonight, the afternoon, we're going to be talking about or previewing the upcoming 2021 Formula One season. There's a lot of changes that have been made in terms of the grid lineup, in terms of the calendar, but also a lot of rule change. So we're going to be going through it step by step and seeing what comes up. So as I said, coming up, we've got a look at this year's 23 race 2021 calendar. We're also going to be having a look at the 20 drivers and the 10 teams that will be making up this year's grid. We're going to have a look at the potential rule changes that are coming in for this year, and obviously we're going to throw our Tottenham's worth and see how well or not we can predict what is going to happen this season. So firstly, starting off, we're going to have a look at this year's calendar. Now, to start off with, the Australian Grand Prix, which should have been happening on the 21st of March, that has been postponed until November. Unfortunately, the COVID protocol in Victoria, in Australia, it won't allow the teams, as it's currently set up, to do their week-long test in Barcelona, then observe the 2-week isolation, and then do the Grand Prix weekend. So Australia is on hold until November. Hopefully we can go there. But the first race on the calendar, Bahrain on the 28th of March. Guys, Bahrain's always a great Grand Prix to go to. Hodders a night race as well, so that's always a good way to start it off.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Tyson, we always get good racing there, so it's a great way to open up the calendar.
Yep, sure do.
Okay, good stuff. They're also doing now the sort of official pre-season test at the Bahrain circuit the week before, so it means the teams and everything, it's all there ready to go, which is actually a really good way to get started. After the Bahrain, we should have been having the Chinese Grand Prix on the 2nd of May. That is off for understandable reasons. So at the moment, the second race in the calendar is penciled in as Imola. This is subject to approval by the FIA, which is not too bad a circuit. And then after that, we've got the first of the double headers. We've got a TBC on the 2nd of May and then Spain on the 9th of May. Now, something that has come up in the last couple of days or so. The 2nd of May, we're hoping that's going to be the Portimao circuit in Portugal. However, the COVID cases have really shot up in Portugal over the last few weeks. So there's now the possibility that there'll be no race on the 2nd of May, but there will be, as we had at the end of last season, a second race on the outer Bahrain circuit on the 4th of April. Hodders, we had a great race on the Bahrain outer circuit, so that's not a bad alternative if that happens.
It absolutely isn't. I mean, it's one of those circuits where anything can happen, and that's the joy of Bahrain. You have two circuits to choose from, so you've always got that as a strong backup.
Absolutely. And Tyson, that was the race where obviously we saw Perez winning his first Grand Prix, which is fantastic. Russell clawed it back twice to nearly win there. And obviously it's another night race, and which are always spectacular to watch.
Yeah, there was some really good moments in the Bahrain Autoroute race.
Okay, so and then obviously Spain to start the European season, so that's not too bad. Or sorry, Imola to start the European season. So next up, we then have F1's Jewel in the Crown, the Monaco Grand Prix in Monte Carlo on the 23rd of May. And then after that, the next of the double headers, Azerbaijan and then Canada. Now, for me, these three races I can't see going ahead, especially Monaco and Azerbaijan. Street circuits, you've got basically you're only going to have one chance to host these circuits, and if for whatever reason coronavirus isn't safe in these areas at this time, these events just won't go ahead. Tyson, it's always a shame when we lose the street circuits off the calendar, but I think FIA and Formula One demonstrated last year they've got to be safe and they're prepared to axe even the best Grand Prix on the calendar.
Yeah, it's just being sensible with all the current protocols in place.
Mm-hmm. And Horace, I know we've had this discussion a few times. Monaco, is it really a race at the moment, even if it were safe to go there?
It's a tricky one. I think there is this common opinion, which I do mildly share, that because of how tight the Monaco circuit is, it is very much a glorified. Some may disagree that it's a glorified procession, and that's purely because overtakes are nigh on impossible, and they do happen. They're almost a once in a lifetime event. So while it's a jewel in the crown, it is getting a little bit scuffed.
Absolutely, yes, and it's a fair comment. If it means that these races at Monte Carlo, at Baku, and Montreal we don't see until next year, I think it will be worth the wait, but we will see. We've then got the European calendar sort of proceeding on. We've got France on the 27th of June at that huge variable test circuit with lots of blue and red stripes on the outside. Tyson, can we really call the French Grand Prix a race as such?
I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it.
I mean, it's saying because obviously, yeah, we've seen it played on the computer games. It's not a circuit that punishes you if you make a mistake. There is just so many big
So much runoff.
concrete runoff areas. And the current obviously layout that they've got at Le Castellet, it's almost basically one half of the circuit is just two big straights separated by a chicane, and then a few wiggly corners, and then the start finish straight the other side. So it's not really a challenge per se. On the other hand, you've got the Red Bull Ring at Austria, hosted the first two races last year, and both of them were absolute crackers.
Yeah, always a good race when you go to Austria.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Hodders, sometimes we get the addition of rain thrown in there as well.
Oh, it's the wonderful thing about motor racing, no matter what level it is that the elements will always play a factor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who doesn't like a wet race from time to time just to add a bit of interest to it?
Indeed.
We don't like it when the forecast comes up, rain in 10 minutes, and then it chucks it down the moment the checkered flag drops. That's no good to us. We'd like it to rain during the race, but anyway, we've then got the British Grand Prix on the 18th of July. Great time to be hosting the British Grand Prix in the middle of summer. We've then got a 2-week break before the Hungarian Grand Prix on the 1st of August. We've then got the traditional 4-week break until the first of the triple headers, Belgium, Netherlands, and Italy. We've then got another sort of Asian triple header, Russia, Singapore, and Japan at the end of September and the beginning of October. And then we've got the Americas triple header of USA, Mexico, and Brazil. Guys, we'll have a look at the European triple header first. Belgium, Netherlands, Italy. Logistically, it's fairly easy for the teams to go between the three countries, and three very exciting Grand Prix. Spa always produces a cracking race. Monza, Gasly's first win there. Again, another fast, high-speed circuit. And then we've got a new race in the calendar. The Netherlands, Zandvoort, Max Verstappen's home race. So, Hodders, what are your thoughts on those?
I mean, I've had a look at the Dutch circuit. I mean, I admit, I'm a person who's returning to Formula One, and I'm looking forward to the Dutch Grand Prix. It does seem like it's going to be quite an interesting circuit. Plenty of tight turns, not many straights to go through. That could make for a very interesting race.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a famous turn on the Zandvoort circuit is a banked one, which we very, very rarely see. So that will be interesting to see what it does to the car in that area. Tyson, the Asian triple header, Russia, Singapore street circuit, and then Suzuka in Japan. What are your thoughts on those?
Japan usually is a good one. Russia, it usually depends what happens. And Singapore, again, street circuit, not a lot of room for error.
And again, Singapore could be one of those that might be scratched in Canada, obviously depending on COVID. And then hopefully we're going to be back in the Americas this year for the USA, Mexico, Brazil triple headers. USA, the Austin circuit it always provides lots of really good action. You've got the uphill climb to turn one, then that downhill sweeper section. That's always good. Mexico, the stadium section, they know how to have a really good festival there, and hopefully circumstances will allow us to go back there. And then of course Interlagos, Brazil, superb circuit, and it has also been announced this week that the proposed circuit in Rio will now not happen because of obviously there's been a lot of opposition to that, which is good because we don't want to see huge deforestation happen just to build a motor racing circuit anywhere. And Interlagos, it provides really good solid racing, so that's all good there. Moving on, again, Australia, there's obviously the asterisk next to this at the moment. It's penciled in for the 21st of November. If it can't go ahead, I think a possible and reasonable alternative could be the Sepang circuit in Malaysia. Tyson, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that would be a reasonable replacement to bring Malaysia back.
Hodders, what do you think?
I think it'll be great to have Malaysia back. I mean, it's not been around for a few years. It's a fine circuit, and you would think by that time of the year, and we are being very, very optimistic here, by autumn you would hope that it would be able to take place, potentially with spectators, by November.
You'd hope so. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to be back in Melbourne. It'd be interesting to see what the weather will be like around that time because, I mean, I'm just trying to work out. So it's our winter sort of be sort of their summer, so it'd be quite a nice time to host the race. Obviously, also with the alternative of Malaysia, you've got Kuala Lumpur Airport pretty much next door to it, so that'll be quite handy logistically for the teams. And the final two races, Saudi Arabia and then the finale in Abu Dhabi. Hodders, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding the potential Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. I mean, the circuit still has to be approved by the FIA, but there is a lot of controversy in regards to this country hosting the race. What are your thoughts?
It's a very difficult one to say. I mean, this is one of those. I mean, I think Saudi Arabia has always been a bit of a. I mean, there could be some that say that they're unfairly treated, but again, I think with any sport, if you're going to go into new territory, then that country is going to be open to a lot of scrutiny. And you can understand to an extent why there is the accusation of what is known as sports washing, because it is an idea of holding a race in a country where while things have improved in recent years, they still have a long way to go, and it's really whether the FIA should be hosting it there or not, and they will have to be listening to what people think on that one.
It'll be obviously a joint decision between the FIA, who obviously are the governing body of the sport, but also Formula One and Liberty Media, who are sort of the commercial rights holders. So I think, as I understand it, it's basically Saudi Arabia. They need to project the right image if they want to be on the calendar and if they want to be on the calendar and stay on the calendar. But we'll wait and see. And then obviously Abu Dhabi, the traditional season finale. So I was saying 23 races in 37 weeks. It's going to be a lot, not necessarily for the drivers, but more for the teams, the mechanics. That's going to be hard work for them. Hodders, 23 races, is that too many?
It does seem it's a few too many. I mean, in an ideal world, I'm a fan of round things, a bit of a number file. I think 23 is going to be interesting, as you said, particularly on the teams. I think particularly where we're in a pandemic and possibly towards the end of the season, a post-pandemic world, there is going to be that element of fatigue. And it's going to be interesting to see what the effect is on the well-being mentally and physically of the teams. And I think the FIA and also teams in particular are going to have to pay particular attention to the mental well-being of their crews.
I mean, that's a very good point in terms of the physical and mental well-being. And I think it'll really come under scrutiny when we look at these races in particular. The 3 back-to-back triple headers, 9 races, 11 weeks. Tyson, it could well be that teams are having to use two sets of mechanics to differentiate between the two races. This is really going to test the mental and the physical well-being of the teams.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm.
23 races, it seems like a lot on the surface, but then you look back at 2020, they did 17 races in 23, 24 weeks, was it?
Mm.
So they are capable of doing it. It's just going to, as Hodders said, really test them.
Mm. And obviously, Formula One sport in general, they need to be obviously mindful of not just the physical impact it's going to have, the fatigue, but also mental health. And mental health is something that is really quite prominent, quite important subject in the sport. So the teams, the FIA, they need to be conscious that we aren't potentially sending mechanics into the middle of a busy pit lane when they're fatigued. So we can't be doing that, and hopefully the mechanics will all be looked after. But I think that being said, we've got an exciting calendar to look forward to. I think it's good to see the classic tracks like Imola back on the calendar. We've got new tracks like the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia. So we've got a lot to look forward to. So we'll see what happens there. Right, so moving on and having a look at this year's grid, and we're going back to front. So we're going to start, unfortunately, at the back with Williams Mercedes. As I said, finished last year for the third year running. No points on the board. Came close, finished 11th 4 times. And had a qualifying best with Russell P11 at the Styrian race. Hodders, Williams need to get their act together. They're under new ownership, but this is a team that should not be fighting to get out of Q1 and just scraping it into the points if they get lucky. This is not a team with that heritage.
Absolutely not. When you consider how long Williams have been in Formula One and how high they've been in the past, I mean, this sudden dip and then trough, it's not really on, considering the investment and the expectations there would be on Williams. As you said, they had 4 11th place finishes, which, again, is the unluckiest place you can get. But again, to be bottom 3 years on the run for any team just isn't very acceptable form.
Absolutely. Tyson, is it fair to say that if this team doesn't start even scoring points finish, even if they finish back again, are we potentially risking seeing Williams go under?
I think that's a fair assumption, yeah, especially now that the main Williams family is out of F1.
Absolutely. I mean, what is good is they've got Jenson Button on board as a senior advisor. He started his career at Williams. He's obviously a former Formula One world champion. He's won lots of races, raced over 300 races, I think. So they've got someone that the Williams family, the community will know. So that there's someone that they can rely on. But I mean, hopefully we'll see Williams moving certainly off the back of the grid. I think it's fair to say that their aim this year, they need to be getting into qualifying 2 on a regular basis, and both cars into qualifying 2, and getting a couple of points on the board. But we will see with that one. So looking at the 2 drivers, then Nicholas Latifi finished, well, there's no other way to say it, last year, 21st with 0 points. Finished 11th 3 times, so close to scoring points, and out qualified by George Russell at every race. That's a pretty damning statistic. Hodders, I think it's fair to say, Latifi is in the last chance saloon. He needs to be upping his game this year.
Agreed. I mean, when you consider that other teams, for example, if a new driver's had a bad season, they're out, he is definitely walking on the metaphorical eggshells. I mean, he has finished bottom. 11 3 times is unlucky, but to only make Q2 once in a season, even though there were 17 races, he has really got to up his game. Otherwise, his seat could very much be up for grabs from those in the Formula 2 ranks.
And we will touch on Formula 2 and Formula 3 ranks a little bit later on. Tyson, I think it's not unreasonable to say that his target this year, he's got to close the qualifying gap to George Russell. Even if he can't out qualify him, he needs to be closing the gap and getting into Q2 more often.
Yeah, we need to be seeing something more from Latifi, to be honest.
Absolutely. And speaking of of his teammate George Russell, classified 18th in the standing, 3 points. Obviously, he got those 3 points when he did the one-off race with Mercedes. He also had just the 11th place finish in Tuscany. However, we cannot forget obviously what happened in Imola, running comfortably in the points and then spinning off under the safety car. He is Mr. Saturday, but he needs to be more Mr. Sunday. Hodders, he just needs a bit more luck in the race, doesn't he? It's not just important for improving his performance. He just needs that fractional bit of luck just to possibly be scoring points.
Absolutely. I mean, watching last season, I feel in a lot of cases, I'm sure others would agree, that George Russell, in some ways, was just unlucky. As you said, he just needs that little bit of luck. He just needs that little bit more. He has that potential to finish in the points when he's not guesting at other teams. He has the 9 Q2 appearances, and he just needs to get his Q2. Even if he can get to Q3, that'd be great. If he can just get that little push, we could see him in the points more often this season.
That's a fair bit. Tyson, is George Russell the potential replacement for Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes?
I definitely think he is. You look at 2018 and the performance he put in F2, he was right up there at the top. He won the series. So he's definitely got the credentials.
Well, we'll wait and see. I say hopefully, we can see Williams moving off the back of the grid. We don't want to see a team with such heritage that far back, and we absolutely can't afford to lose any teams off of the Formula One grid. So we will wait and see what happens. Anyway, moving forward and moving on to Haas, who have a completely different team lineup. Kevin Magnussen and Roman Grosjean have moved on, and I think it's also fair to say to Roman, obviously, best wishes for his continued recovery and also best of luck in the IndyCar series, which is where he'll be racing next year. In terms of Haas, 9th last year, only 3 points. That's not really good enough considering the amount of investment that is coming in from the Haas Corporation at the US. Got into Q2 6 times. That's not too bad, but they need to be doing so more. And again, they finished 9th in the championship for the last 2 years. It's not good enough. Hodders, with 2 young drivers coming in, are we going to see any improvements this year?
I think with 2 very fresh drivers from Formula 2, I think they're going to be unknown entities. They both performed strongly in Formula 2 last season, and again, I think it could well be an interesting shot in the dark. I don't think they're going to be up, top 5, 6 or anything else, but we could see some surprises from them. They're both good drivers. It's just a case of whether they can perform in Formula 1.
And Tyson, we've often seen the case where really, really good drivers in the Formula 2 category, they come into Formula 1 and it's a completely different playing field.
Yeah, they sometimes end up crumbling under the pressure because it's a whole lot different when you come into Formula 1.
Absolutely. So we'll look at the 2 drivers. Nikita Mazepin, firstly, finished 5th in the Formula 2 series last year and came runner-up GP3 in 2018. Hodders, I think it's fair to say that Mr. Mazepin has been making headlines for all the wrong reasons before he's even been racing.
Unfortunately, yes, and I think I won't go into much detail because I think it's taken as read what's happened. He really does need to behave himself because I think looking at how people see him already, I mean, I don't want him to be seen as the bad boy of Formula One, but he hasn't really been helping himself in terms of not just the incident that was well known late last year, but also how he's been essentially arguing constantly with his team colleagues in the pit lane. So he can race, certainly, but he's got to watch his temper and watch what he does. Otherwise, he will be losing that seat for non-racing reasons.
Tyson, I think it's just fair to say He just needs to do his talking on the track, on the timesheets, and just leave the social media stuff alone, really.
Yeah, indeed.
But I think it's moving on to his teammate. It's always great to see the Schumacher name back in Formula One. Mick Schumacher, Michael's son, the 2018 Formula 3 European champion and last year's Formula 2 champion. Hodders, you obviously watched quite a fair bit of Formula 2. He had a magnificent performance last year. What do you think that Mick's target would be for this year?
I don't think I'm going to set a major target for him. I mean, I will say this much, that I think having the name Schumacher, he's going to have a lot of scrutiny on him, and I'm hoping there isn't excessive hype and pressure on the lad. He's a very good driver, and I saw that last season, that he's a solid driver. I think this year is very much a case of him settling into Formula One, getting a feel for the car, and just generally gaining his confidence. He's new, and there's always pressure on any new Formula One driver because the pressure is on him in the first season. But with the name Schumacher, people expect big things of him. I think his aim is to, I almost say, enjoy the season, but do the best he can at the same time.
Yeah, Tyson, do you think that's a fair comment that he needs to focus on his performances, make sure that he is on that Formula One grid on merit and not because of who his father is, basically.
Yeah, I would say he's definitely there on merit. Obviously, the Schumacher name, there is a lot of pressure that's going to come with that, but he has shown Formula 3, Formula 2, he can get it done on the track.
Okay, well, so we're excited to see how that turns out. So moving forward then on the grid, moving to Alfa Romeo Ferrari, last year's 8th place finishing team. 5 points finishes, so not too bad. Both drivers into Q3 in just one occasion. And again, the consistency is there, but consistently 8th for the second year running. Tyson, I will come to you first. Alfa Romeo, what do they need to be doing to move up the grid more?
I'm not really sure what they can do at this point, because they seem to have gotten tangled up with everything that has happened to Ferrari and why they've slid backwards down the grid.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, actually. Sort of that power unit for all of the Ferrari powered teams gave them a lot of grief last year. We'll move on to the drivers. Kimi Raikkonen. Hodders, I will sort of push the issue on this. Why is Kimi Raikkonen still racing? A driver who has won over 20 races. He won the 2007 world title, and yet he's not in a position where he's going to be finishing on the podium, winning races. Why is he still racing?
It's a very difficult one to answer. I mean, he is going, it should be noted, it's quite it must be a near record in Formula One. This will be his 21st Formula One season. It's a difficult one to answer. It may well be it's the prestige of his name and his past pedigree, potentially. But it is a question that he will have to answer for himself through performance. I mean, the last thing we want, to use a sporting analogy, is we don't want him in a team just for his retirement run more than anything else. Similar to how some footballers go to America in the MLS to see out their final days of racing. We don't want him in there purely for that. He needs to actually prove that he still has what it takes to still compete at 41, 42 years of age. And that's not an age thing at all. That's just based on his experience. He can do better.
I mean, it's a good point that he is into his 40s, and obviously physically he can still push the car, because let's not be under any illusion here. To drive a Formula One car, whether you're 21 or 41, it is a physically demanding job. We're looking at his record from last year. Finished 9th twice, 4 Q2 appearances. I think basically he needs to be aiming to get more into Q2, not necessarily push for Q3, just more regular Q2 appearances, and then potentially, instead of having 9th place finishes, perhaps have a couple of 8th place finishes. I don't think there's not really much that Kimi can improve upon, if the car doesn't improve, that sort of thing. We'll also look at teammate Giovinazzi. again, I think this is a driver that is in the last chance zone. He needs to be upping his game. Tyson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of good talent in the Ferrari Driver Academy, so I think Giovinazzi, he needs to perform this year.
Hmm. I mean, it's fair to say though, Hodders, yeah, he outqualified Raikkonen 9 times last year, so he appears to have the measure on Saturday. But it's the Sunday performances where the points are handed out.
Exactly. I mean, there's no prizes for becoming pole position apart from having the slight advantage at the start of the grid, which again, over anywhere between 50 to 70 laps, can change at any time. He has the potential, and I think he knows he can. He knows he can do better. As you said, he's just got to have the full performance on the day on the Sunday. Friday's a good way to get the feel on practice. Saturday's great for qualifying, but it all comes down to Sunday.
Very fair point indeed. Right, well now we're moving forward towards the teams that are really quite compressed midfield. So we're going to move to AlphaTauri Honda. 7th place finished last year, and obviously that fantastic result at Monza, winning their home Grand Prix. They're regularly getting into qualifying 3, and I mean that's statistic there. That was their best points haul last year than Toro Rosso ever got. I think it's fair to say, the race win will push that team on, but are they now having to think, right, they need to be challenging more for podiums? I don't think a race win, unless you have a wacky race, is going to be attainable. But it's now a case of, instead of finishing P6 down to P10, they need to be pushing more towards P4, P5, possibly P3, P2 if they get lucky.
I think so as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, Gasly's win at Monza was excellent. It was a huge confidence boost for the team as a whole. It is difficult being in that middle pack of constructors, but again, I agree with you. They do need to be pushing for those higher positions. Being in those lower point scoring positions is all great, and it can be a great thing, but they don't want to be getting comfortable. They can do more, and they can certainly push for more. And I think they could still probably match that tally this year with the young drivers that they have.
Yeah, and of course, looking at the drivers, Pierre Gasly finishing the top 10 last year, obviously his debut win at Monza. Tyson, Pierre Gasly is a very, very strong driver. I think what won't help him is he has contracted COVID whilst we've been in the off season. I think if Gasly can just keep moving up the grid even slightly, he's going to obviously really help the team, but also it could well be that other constructors are going to be looking at him for 2022 possibly.
Yeah, I don't feel we really got to see his potential in the Red Bull. They just let him go too early. He's a lot more comfortable in the AlphaTauri.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think Pierre. Yeah, I think he was possibly offered the chance to go to Red Bull this year, but he's made it clear he's comfortable at AlphaTauri.
Yeah, I believe so.
He's comfortable where he is. He doesn't have that pressure on him to deliver. He knows he can deliver what the team needs very comfortably on regular basis, and he can be in the right place at the right time if the circumstances allow for it. So looking at his teammate for this year, another new driver, Yuki Tsunoda from Japan. So Formula 4 Japan champion in 2018, moved straight into Formula 3 for 2019, where he got the one win, and then finishing third in last year's Formula 2. Hodders, what did you think of Tsunoda when you were watching him last year?
I will admit, I have a soft spot for Japanese drivers just in general. I have a real soft spot for Tsunoda. I really like his racing style. He's a strong racer. His style is pleasing. And I've been looking at some of the behind the scenes recently about AlphaTauri. I like his positive attitude. He seems very positive. He has a positive racing outlook. And he's also willing to learn. He's been in the youth programs for a long time. He's an efficient driver. And I think he could be an interesting entity this year.
Okay. And also, Tyson, obviously, Tsunoda, he has those links with Honda, which will also help him. So, could he be a threat to Pierre Gasly this year? Could he go toe to toe with the Frenchman?
It's a possibility. He had some really good showings in F2 last year, 3 race wins.
Yeah,
So,
three wins, 4 pole positions.
yeah, I think we're going to see some good battles between the two of them.
Good stuff. So long as they follow rule number 1, and that is don't hit
Don't hit
your
your
teammates.
teammates.
Absolutely. We hope not. But yeah, AlphaTauri will be an exciting team to watch in 2021. Now, Ferrari. I don't think we would be talking about the Ferrari team this far back, but I mean, the stats there speak for themselves. 3 podiums, both cars eliminating qualifying to on 5 occasions, and their worst championship finish for 40 years. Some of the other notes I've got, over the last 10 years, they've hired 2 world champions in Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel, thinking that would get them to the front. That hasn't worked. Their last titles were 2007, 2008. Hodders, Ferrari need to get back to the front and quick, because this season, the 2020 season, was a complete write-off.
2020 for them, I think, hopefully, you would think that was a huge shock to the system. I mean, a team with a pedigree like Ferrari being middle of the pack after the dominance for years will have been a huge shock, and they will think of themselves, that is not acceptable, particularly with the drivers that they have. Worst championship finish in 40 years. They've got some serious soul-searching to do this year, and they have got to perform.
And that power unit, it needs to be sorted, because obviously Mercedes have got the March, which we will obviously get on to later. You've got Renault, you've got Honda, who are leaving the sport into. Ferrari need to get back to the front of the grid, because otherwise you're going to have other teams like Haas, like Ferrari, thinking, okay, we may need to go elsewhere for our power units. And I say, the people at Maranello, this would have been a huge shock to them. Tyson, we should not be seeing a team like this, struggling to get out of Q3, just about getting out of Q2. Just getting out of Q1, just struggling to get out. It's not acceptable at any level. And the Tifosi, the Ferrari fans, they would not have been happy.
Yeah, unacceptable is the only word for it, really.
Mm-hmm. So we're now looking at the 2 drivers, the Monegasque Charles Leclerc, now the number 1 driver, effectively. Only 2 podiums last year, qualified 4th. Tyson, what can Charles Leclerc reasonably aim for this year?
I don't think the points tells the whole story, because Leclerc, he was dragging that Ferrari into positions that, honestly, it had no right to be up there as high as it was with the car he was given. He was doing a really good job.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also fair to assume that, looking at the points that Ferrari accrued and where they finished in the championship, I think a lot of it didn't help with the fact that pretty much halfway, the second half of the season, Vettel had given up. He wasn't driving the wheels off the car that we know he can do. And obviously we'll cover Sebastian later. Carlos Sainz, coming across from McLaren, he had a superb season. Hodders, he could be putting Leclerc under pressure. You've got 2 exciting young drivers at Ferrari.
Which you would hope would be a huge boost for Ferrari as well, in that in the past they had their veterans that got them success. They have young drivers. They have the potential to do well. The pressure will definitely be on Sainz to do well, and Leclerc could definitely be one to give him a metaphorical kick up the rear if he doesn't perform. Sainz is a good driver, and you'd think he would push for more than 6 this season.
And you'd hope, actually, with 2 young drivers, if they are delivering for the team, you'd hope in turn that actually, instead of basically just buying drivers in who have the experience, develop these 2 drivers, push them on, because you could really get something out of these 2. We'll be waiting to see what happens with Ferrari for this year. So Alpine, it's not a new team. It's basically what the Renault team was last year. I think Alpine is like the sports car division of Renault. They had a good solid season last year, finishing 5th, 2 podiums with Ricciardo, qualifying 4th in Belgium, and they doubled their points haul from 2019. They have had their team principal, Cyril Abitbol, leave. Whether that's anything to do with the 2 tattoos that he's got to get from Ricciardo's podium finishes is one thing. But that is one thing that is going to destabilise the team Hodders. Their team principal leaving during the winter break.
It's something a team never wants, is to have their principal leave in the off season, or any time really, but particularly during the winter break or winter off season is the last thing you want. You've got to hope it doesn't knock their confidence and that they can band together around whoever replaces them as principal and the others who move up, so they can actually maintain the form that they have.
We will see. So, Tyson, we're going to move on to the drivers. Fernando Alonso is back the double world champion, 32 wins, 22 poles, and the second oldest driver on the grid behind Kimi Raikkonen. The question's got to be asked, why is he coming back?
I think that may be because the McLaren IndyCar thing hasn't really worked out how he expected. But former world champion, he's going to bring a lot of experience to the team.
It's his third stint with the the Renault team. Obviously, he was with Renault from 2003 through to 2006. He then came back to Renault around the 2008-2009 seasons, and then obviously he did a bit of time at Ferrari and a bit of time at McLaren. We'll wait and see. I mean, I don't know what Fernando's ambitions are going to be this year. If he thinks he's going to be racing at the front of the field on a regular basis, I think that's going to be a concern. I think it's unlikely to happen. But I'd say he's got the experience, so let's see what happens there. His teammate Esteban Ocon, the French driver, he had a relatively good season last year. I think 12th in the standings, perhaps a little harsh. Finishing second at Sakir, which was great, and Q3 most of the races. Hodders, the first target of any driver, beat your teammate. Could Ocon beat Fernando?
The way I would put it is, considering that Alonso has been away from Formula One for a couple of years, is never say never. I mean, Ocon is young, he has the form, he had that second place at Sakir, which would be a huge confidence boost, and having had Q3 in half his races, he could certainly give Alonso a run for his money.
Absolutely. Just as long as he's not doing what he did at Racing Point a few years back and banging wheels quite literally with his teammate, because I think if that does happen, there's only going to be one winner from that battle. So moving forward now, Racing Point, now known as Aston Martin Mercedes, what a season they had last year. 195 points. So what a massive achievement. Obviously had their debut win, their debut pole. However, they could have finished a lot higher if they didn't have those 15 points deducted for effectively copying part of the Mercedes brakes, which is not a clever idea. Hodders, there's been a lot of investment from Lawrence Stroll, who's taken over teams. He's made it very clear that his team are going to be aiming for the world title. I think this year they've got to be looking to close the gap on McLaren and possibly Red Bull.
Yeah, they can aim for the title, but I don't think they'll be getting the title just yet. As you quite rightly said, I think they need to be closing the gap on the teams above them. It's a shame that they decided to go down the route of imitation, the greatest form of flattery, and got the technical offence for it, which will have hurt them. But if they can stick within the rules and stick with what they're good at doing, they could be closing the gap and potentially be top 3 this year.
Having a look at the two drivers, firstly, Sebastian Vettel, who had an awful season last year for, I think that was partly due to the car and partly due to him, but that was his worst finish since his first full season in 2007. Only one podium in Turkey, qualified 5th. But Vettel brings a lot of experience, which will help Aston Martin. So what do you think Vettel's aims are going to be for this year?
He is definitely going to be wanting to put good finishes in, and we know he can do it. But he just needs to be motivated, and that's not what we've seen the last few years.
So would it be fair to say, he needs to be regularly getting into qualifying 3 and finishing top 5 on a regular basis, to push him up, to get his confidence up, but also to push the team, closer to the front of the pack?
Yep, absolutely.
I think it's a fair summary. And Vettel's teammate Lance Stroll, he had a fairly good season. I think the finish 11th and 75 points is a little unfortunate, given he had 2 podium finishes and obviously his first pole position. A lot of people are thinking, Hodders, that Stroll is in there because it's his father running the team. This season, he has to earn his place.
I think the same could be said for quite a few of the other younger drivers that are in Formula One as well, in that some of them are in there. Some may argue that they're in there because of their father's income. I mean, I know that other drivers have had their teams boosted by their father's income. But yes, he has got to prove that he is there by merit. He had 11th, which is great, and he can do better. And I'd like to think I have confidence that he will push to try harder and do better this year, because again, he has to prove he's there by right, as do the likes of Mick Schumacher and other young drivers who are making their way into Formula One and continuing to do so.
Mm-hmm. And quick question for the pair of you: could Lance Stroll go toe to toe with Vettel, both in terms of qualifying the race? Tyson, will come to you first.
He could do. Stroll is good, but inconsistent. He has had really good races here and there, but it's the consistency.
Hodders, what do you reckon?
I agree with Tyson there. If he can just be more, he knows he's good. If he can just get a good, consistent, strong run, he could certainly give Vettel a run. I mean, Vettel's going to have his confidence knocked from having a rather poor season in 2020. 2021, if Stroll can focus on his A game, drive well, and be consistent, he could certainly compete with him.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see how that one. And obviously, a last point to just quickly touch on British Racing Green. We're going to see that back on the grid, and that's always a classic to see that mark back on the Formula One circuit.
So, yeah, that's going to be great to see that back.
So now moving to McLaren Mercedes, third place shot, an absolutely awesome season. Double points finishes for most of the races. Second row for their best finish since 2012. And also re-establishing that partnership with Mercedes. So this is going to be a cracking year to watch them. Hodders, could they be challenging Red Bull for second?
I don't see any reason why they couldn't. Again, it's the age-old thing of confidence, I'll go back to every time. They had a great season last year. They will want to keep that form maintained. They have that momentum, the boost from last year. They will want to keep that going and push further for second. And I don't think it's impossible by any means.
Absolutely. Tyson, they haven't won since 2012. Could this be the year that we finally see McLaren back on top of the top step, even if it's only on a couple of occasions?
I hope so. With the Mercedes engine, they've got a real chance of doing it. And you look at where they were even just 5 years ago, how much further they've come over those years.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all remember the sort of the running gag over the quote GP2 engine unquote, and that Honda engine. As you say, it was just an awful run. But it's looking good for the Woking based team. So looking at the drivers, then Daniel Ricciardo, fifth last year, so he had a very good run. I think I'm trying to think, was he best? More or less best of the rest. 2 podiums at Nürburgring and Imola, so the 2 classic tracks, and didn't get into Q3 on only 3 occasions. Daniel Ricciardo is a superb driver when he's got the right car and on his day. Could he potentially be getting regular podium finishes at the minimum with this McLaren car, or when he's on his day?
When he's on his day, and if he's got the right car, you can never rule out Ricciardo. His racing style works. He's a strong driver. He's a solid driver. He can deliver results. And if he has the right mindset and he uses the car efficiently and the car works for him, never say never to him getting more podiums this year.
Okay, we look forward to seeing that great big smile on the podium, and possibly a couple of shoeies or two. We'll have to wait and see. His teammate, and I'm looking forward to seeing how these two are going to work together this year. Lando Norris, top 10 finish last year. He got his podium on the opening race in Austria, and he's always been in Q2. Tyson, Norris had a good start last year, but he sort of tailed off towards the end. He needs to be doing better than that.
Yeah, he had a lot of last lap miracles where he was just pumping in the fastest laps. He's he's a good driver. But I think with Ricardo, he's going to be really pushed this year.
Mm-hmm. Hodders, from what I can see, I think Ricardo and Norris, they are going to be evenly matched. They're going to really, really push each other, which can only benefit McLaren.
Absolutely. And when you've got two very strong drivers in a team that will compete with each other, and obviously not physically compete with each other, touching wheels and stuff, they will. I think the great thing about them is they're both strong drivers. They know they are. They will probably bounce off each other, and one success will drive the other to try and do even better. So a friendly rivalry, but for a more mutual means of success.
Okay, well, so we look forward to it, and I can't wait to see the sort of antics that Ricardo and Norris will get up to, because we saw what happened with Sainz and Norris last year. It was just caused all sorts of hilarity, but it worked for the team. So hopefully the relation between Ricardo and Norris will be just as good. Moving on to the Red Bull Racing Honda runner-up last year. They only had 2 wins, which isn't a good haul. Only 1 pole position, but it's their best finish since 2016, obviously overtaking Ferrari. Red Bull, they need to close the gap to Mercedes, but equally they're going to need to hold off McLaren, who they are going to challenge them. But another problem they've got, Honda leaving the sport at the end of the year, so they've got a lot of stuff to be thinking about and working on this year, haven't they? Hodders.
Absolutely. I mean, losing Honda is going to be a big blow, I think, to not just them, but other teams that use of course, the Honda power unit as well. Again, they're high up, their second place. Yes, only 1 pole, but a strong finish for the first time since 2016 can't be knocked. With McLaren knocking on the door, they are going to be under pressure to maintain that second place finish, because they are going to have to fight tooth and nail to avoid losing it this year.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, we obviously touched on it. Honda pulling out of Formula One. Who could you see potentially providing with the power unit for next year? Obviously, Mercedes, they are highly unlikely to be wanting to provide their closest rivals with the same power unit. Ferrari, with the way it's been this year, unsure. Renault, again, they could re-establish the partnership. Could they even potentially build their own power unit? Tyson, what are your thoughts on how Red Bull will be powered going forward?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Like you said, Mercedes, I can't see them giving an engine to their nearest rival. Ferrari, possibility. Renault, that is a burned bridge I don't think they want to go back to. So it may just be, they have to work on their own engine.
Mm-hmm. But as I understand the technical rules is that if Red Bull basically can't find anyone else or they can't build their own, then Renault, because they provide the least number of engines to the grid, they would be obliged to provide Red Bull with the engines, which would be interesting. But obviously, I don't think that they want to be forced on that one. You never know. We will see. There might be a surprise come out of the woodwork. We'll have to wait and see. So looking at the 2 drivers for this year, and I think this is one of the strongest pairings on the grid. Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. We'll look at Perez first. Obviously, finishing best of the rest with Racing Point. His debut win at Sakir, which was fantastic to see. And this was a lot of the initial off-season talk. Where would Sergio Perez going to be going? Because he originally didn't have his drive at Racing Point. He's in a Red Bull, but I think the expectation, Hodders, is he's going to have to be challenging Verstappen, and regular podium finishes will be the absolute minimum expected.
When you're in a team that has been runner-up and had its best finish, there is going to be that huge expectation that he is going to have to deliver, to maintain that form. He has got to give Verstappen a run for his money. They're both good drivers, and Perez has absolutely got to be on his absolute A game and A drive.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Perez, he did have a 1-year opportunity at McLaren. I think that was early in his career. It didn't quite work out, and also at the time the car was not great. But he is now a race winner, so the expectation is there for him to be scoring podiums on a regular basis, possibly winning a couple of races. Tyson, exciting to see Perez in a Red Bull.
Yeah, very exciting. Again, he's been around for a while. He's shown that he can put the car up there, but now he's got the drive. He's got to really show what he can do.
Mm-hmm. And his teammate Max Verstappen. This is Max's year when he really needs to perform. Yes, Mercedes have been far and away the best, and a haul of 214 points last year, including 11 podiums and 2 wins, and qualifying 3 in every race. So Max just needs to just push forward a bit more, but that's whether the car will allow him to do so, and obviously whether Mercedes will allow him to do so. Hodders, what are your thoughts with Max?
I think Max could have a very, very good season. I mean, I have seen others going for long shot predictions that he could challenge for the title, which some may think impossible, but I don't think it's impossible. It's possibly a little improbable. But Q3 in every race, 5 front row starts, 11 podia. He could do a Leicester City, so to speak, in Formula One terms. Anything is possible.
Indeed, we've got to wait and see. And of course, again, Perez and Verstappen, they may bounce off each other, spark each other, and it may end up pushing Red Bull a lot closer to Mercedes. But we'll wait and see. Tyson, it's going to be exciting to watch that pair and see how they work.
Yeah, especially after seeing how Perez and Ocon worked together, quote, at Racing Point. I just hope we don't see something similar where Perez and Verstappen are banging wheels every other race.
Absolutely, because that's what they can ill afford. Unfortunately, Red Bull, we've seen that happen on quite a few occasions, and the hierarchy at Red Bull, they don't want that. Simple as. So moving right to the front of the pack now, the Mercedes F1 team, world champions with a whopping 573 points. 13 wins, 15 poles, the first ever team in Formula One history to win 7 consecutive championships. And not just that, but 7 consecutive drivers and world champion and constructors world titles. Tyson, I'll come to you. How on earth can they improve?
How do you improve on that?
I mean, it was an absolutely dominant season by Mercedes. So, could they win an 8th world title? I mean, they've got to be the favourites, haven't they, Tyson?
Yeah, they have to be.
Got to be. I mean, we'll say at this point, Lewis Hamilton is the only unconfirmed driver. So we are doing this podcast on the basis that Lewis will sign from Mercedes. I can't see why he wouldn't. Hodders, same with Mercedes, really. How can Lewis improve? He is just absolutely running away with things at the moment.
I mean, the only thing he can do is continue to break more records. I mean, he's already equalled the number of championships that Michael Schumacher did with 7. The only thing he can really improve on is to go for the 8th and have it outright.
Mm-hmm. And obviously possibly become the first driver to win 100 Formula One races, which would be a phenomenal achievement. Tyson, if Hamilton does race this series and he does go on to win the title as we're all predicting, could this be his final season? Could he basically just turn around and say, well, I've got all the records, no one's breaking them for a long while, that's it?
It's a possibility. With how long these contract negotiations are going on for, I just wonder what Hamilton's future is.
We will wait and see. And His teammate Valtteri Bottas. As I come to you on this one, is this Bottas's final chance at Mercedes? Because he has been there since 2017, and it just seems he always, the first couple of races, he has a good start, he's leading the title, but then his challenge just ever so slightly slips, and Hamilton just romps into the distance. It's just Bottas needs to stay on Hamilton's heels, doesn't he?
Exactly. I mean, you never want to be second fiddle to a world champion anyway, but I don't think he minds that. He is more than capable of keeping Lewis Hamilton on his toes. He has got to mount a mighty challenge. I mean, there is the expectation that he has got to absolutely ensure that Lewis Hamilton, sir, does not run away with the title as he has in the past. He has got to try and match him or better him on every single occasion that he can get.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we saw Bottas his performance in Sakir when he was up against George Russell, and everyone thought, well, hang on, this is going to be a much better measure, and George Russell just trounced him. So it's not that Bottas appears to be a not as good a driver because of who he's up against. When he was up against a rookie essentially in George Russell, that weekend his performance was poor as well. Tyson, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Bottas, he's shown on Saturday. Sometimes he can put it on pole. Sundays, he just seems to have this one moment every race where he lets up for a little bit, and then Hamilton just takes over from there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say. So I think it's fair to say, guys, the three of us, we are all predicting that it'll be Mercedes and Hamilton again as the 2021 world champs, because Mercedes just seem that far in front of the of everyone else.
I think that's a safe bet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that. It's going to be very difficult to look past any other outcome.
Yeah, let's say it'll be a massive surprise if we don't. But I think it would be warmly welcomed if it was a much closer title race, because the fact that Hamilton had the title wrapped up in Turkey with I think 4 races to go in a 17 race championship. Three quarters way through. Obviously, all of us we'd like the title race to go all the way down to the final race, but the title race needs to go on long enough to keep people interested, and Mercedes and Hamilton are doing a good job. So we'll wait and see what happens. I mean, hopefully we'll see a closing of the gap, and some of the rule changes may help that. We'll discuss that in a few minutes. So that's the 2021 grid. That is the 10 teams and the 20 drivers that will be filling the grid at the Bahrain Grand Prix in a couple of months' time. So as usual with every new season, there are new regulations. So let's have a look at it. And this for me is the big one, the cost cap. So there is now a financial limit which the teams can spend. So for this year, it's 145 million that they've been allowed to spend on this year's car, but the FIA have allowed for an extra $2.4 million because there's 2 additional races on the calendar. So this cost cap, it excludes marketing, the drivers' salaries, the salaries of the 3 highest earners. So it might be sporting director, technical director, and the team principal, for example. Obviously, any sick leave, any medical benefits, any redundancy benefits. Now, this cost cap is going to get tighter for 2022. It's going to go to $140 million, and then the year after, $135 million. The teams have got 4 years and $45 million to purchase machinery to help with the building. So that's a 4-year investment on the cars. The breach penalties now, the FIA are not mucking around with this one. It'll be fines, and I expect very huge fines for any very minor infringements. You're then potentially looking at hitting the teams really where it hurts on the scoreboard, deduction of championship points, race bans, and in worst case scenarios, championship disqualification. Tyson, I will come to you first. I think this is something that the sport has been needing for such a long time, and hopefully it will help to not level the playing field, but certainly close it up from the front to the back.
Yeah, the costs between the top teams and the mid teams, it has just spiraled out of control now. We even joke around that there's a Formula 1.5 for the mid teams. So hopefully this is going to close things up a little bit.
I mean, to give you an idea, it's I think last year I saw something. It's basically Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull that are spending more than the 145 million at the moment. So it'll be those three teams that will be mostly affected. Hodders, I think the breach penalties are the right thing. You can't go with little fines or grid penalties or little things. You need to, if the teams are going to break these rules, it needs to hit them where it hurts, and that is on the scoreboard.
Exactly. I mean, I think the fines will be harmful to begin with anyway, but it is very. I mean, the FIA has got to be absolutely commended for putting these penalties in place. Some might think they can be a little harsh, but they are there for a reason. You would hope that the likes of point deductions, race bans, and inevitable championship disqualification, you would hope they are things that have to be rarely, if ever, used at all. But at least teams will know they are there, and if they sidestep the rules, they are going to have the FIA come down on them hard.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll wait and see what happens. I mean, hopefully we don't see any teams severely breaking these rules. We may see huge fines imposed for very minor infractions, and hopefully nothing beyond that. But the teams are going to have to be very, very clear on and very transparent with the FIA on their spending costs, because of course they try and hide from that. That's going to give them a spot of bother as well. Looking at the other rule change now, the aerodynamic test. So I'll try and explain this for those who are not technically minded. So the teams will now be restricted in terms of how much time they can spend in the wind tunnels and using all the various computer simulations to help with the aerodynamic testing of the cars. Now, these figures on the screen, these are in comparison with the time they spent in the wind tunnel, etc. last year. So Mercedes, they will have a 10% drop on the amount of time that they had last year. Obviously, Alpine in the middle, they'll have no change. The teams towards the bottom, they will have more time. Tyson, I think this is again another measure to help level or sort of close the gap up, because aerodynamic is a massive factor when these in getting these cars work properly.
Yeah, aero's just so important now.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, do you think that's a fair spread there? It's if you are more successful, you're going to have that time taken, which is fair, but we'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
Yeah, okay, so we'll move on from there. The weight increase now, not really much to be said on this. So the cars on their own, so no fuel, and I think this is combined with the driver's car. It's going to weigh 752 kilos, and the power unit is going to weigh 150 kilos. And these changes have been made to stop teams from going out and using these fancy exotic materials, and in some cases ridiculously expensive materials, to bring the weight down. So now, no, that's not going to happen. So there's that bit. The tyre change. Now there's a lot here. It'll be interesting to see what everyone thinks with this one. So the tyres as a whole have been changed to make sure they are better. Also, they have better integrity, because we don't want to see the tyre failures that we saw at Silverstone. We had the two Mercedes. We had one of the AlphaTauris have an almighty accident through the sweepers. Hodders, these tyres at any level, they need to be safe and durable.
Absolutely, not just for the sake of the drivers, but also for the crews around the circuit as well. The last thing you want is to have a tyre completely blown come flying into your face. And particularly when it's Formula One, which is the gold standard of motor racing, you need the absolute best, safest tyres you can have.
Absolutely. The tyre allocations have been standardised. So prior to last year, basically the teams could choose how many sets of softs, how many sets of medium tyres, and how many sets of hard tyres. They allow basically 13 sets of dry tyres, but they had a choice on what they wanted. This year, and in particular in response to COVID, Pirelli have now said we are going to do the same amount of soft tyres, 8 sets, the same amount of medium tyres, 3 sets, and the same amount of hard tyres, 2 sets for every driver and every team. So no team has an advantage per se. What this is going to do, however, and Tyson, I'll come to you on this first, it's going to mean that any car that is it wears the tyres too much, they're going to struggle this year.
It's an interesting one. I think it removes a little bit of the strategy of selecting which tyres to use.
Yeah, and that's also a good point because it previously, some teams, if they felt that their cars were going to be sort of wearing the tyres too much, they would go for more sets of hard tyres. Whereas at the other end, if they felt that actually the cars had a lot of grip and they had that reliability on the tyres, they could perhaps go for 9 sets of soft tyres. So, Hollis, I think this is a sensible move, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens in regards to the strategy.
It's going to be very interesting how the strategy is because, as you said, it's standardized. Everybody is on quote unquote the level with tyres. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they strategize and use tactics when it comes to tyre management. Although it may also mean that some teams really have to buck up their ideas on tyre management if they've been a bit lax here and there.
And it's not just the teams; it'll be the drivers as well. They all
Yes.
need to have that art of tyre management down to a fine tee. One thing that the FIA have said with this is if they have a reason to think that for safety reasons or whatever the allocations need to change, they can do that up to 2 weeks before the race event. So it may well be that we see this, for example, this allocation, for example, change at Silverstone at the British Grand Prix because obviously it seems to be much more abrasive on the tyres. So, and this bit now, we had quite a bit of a discussion on this last year in regards to the rule breaches when I'm trying to who was it? It was George Russell, and he ended up using a set of Bottas's tyres at the Sakir Grand Prix, and effectively using 14 sets of tyres over a race weekend when you're only allowed to use 13. Now, last year's rules were pretty clear in that the only 2 penalties available were a disqualification and a grid penalty. Now, in this instance, the FIA fined the team, which I think actually that was quite commendable, and that was the best way to do it because Mercedes realised the problem straight away, brought the car in at the next stop. It was actually under safety car, so actually they were really severely penalised because of this. But I mean they've opened it up so that it means when it happens by accident, fine. So the rules this year are that if a driver is using a mixed set, so for example he's got mediums on the front and hard tyres on the back, or he's got his teammates' tyres on, he must come in and change them within crossing the start-finish line twice, so completing 3 laps. If he doesn't, it's an automatic 10-second stop-go penalty. If he does it beforehand, not a problem. Not a problem because obviously, let's face it, if you're taking 2 pit stops to change tyres in 3 laps, that is going to cost you in terms of time. Hodders, good decision from the FIA to make that change?
I think it's a sensible decision because I think it's better to bring in a slightly light spot. I mean, pit crews are human, drivers are human. They make mistakes in these sorts of occasions. It's not as major an infraction as it could be for other breaches of rules, but I think bringing in this 2 or 3 laps to avoid this penalty is sensible. I'd like to think that by bringing that in as well, having to go through to change for the pit stop, as you said, is punishment enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Tyson, I think it's also fair to say that if any team were to deliberately break this rule, i.e. just basically put a set of his teammates' tyres and go all the way to the end of the race, I think the stewards presumably would have the power to go, well, a 10-second stop go is not enough. We can look at a disqualification on this.
Oh, yeah. It just happens sometimes, as we saw with Mercedes. And pitting again, punishment enough. Disqualification, far too harsh, unless
it's deliberate, which it wasn't with George Russell. So
not at all.
Yeah, and that's a good move there, I think. So having a look at some of the other changes, and there are a lot of changes. I mean, it took me quite a while to go through all the various changes. So first and foremost, the practice sessions are all now 60 minutes. So the sessions on Friday morning, Friday afternoon, they were 90 minutes. They're now down to 60 minutes. That is reducing their practice time from 4 to 3 hours. Tyson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good move because we saw a race last season. I think it was one of the Italian races. They only had one practice session, and a lot of things happened that you just didn't expect to see because they didn't have that practice time.
Yes, I recall that one. It was actually the race at the Nürburgring where both Friday sessions were completely washed out, and the teams literally only had an hour to do all of their practice runs. It's going to mean that any mistakes holders in the Friday practice sessions are going to really punish them in terms of it's going to limit their running time.
Exactly. They have got them with the reduction down 60 minutes for everything. That's an hour they've lost, and in Formula One with making amendments, an hour is a very, very long time. So teams are very much going to have to be on their guard.
Mm-hmm. And obviously reliability issues as well could also cause problems. Green materials are sort of being welcomed, and with all this thing about obviously the FIA's goal of Formula One being net carbon zero in 2030, giving teams the allowance to use green materials. So, like on the list I've got here is flax, hemp, linen, cotton, bamboo. So those sort of materials. It'll be interesting to see how the teams work with this. Hodders, what's your thoughts here?
I mean, I like to try and be green-minded where I can. I'm not a huge green fanaticist, but I very much welcome and I actually commend the FIA on allowing this. I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how teams innovate with more sustainable materials. I mean, bamboo can be used for many things, for example. It'd be interesting to see how it works in a Formula One vehicle, and obviously it'll be subject to the same safety standards. I'll be very curious what comes in.
Mm-hmm. It's something to keep an eye on for sure. So next one, maximum race time reduced from 4 to 3 hours. Now this one I have got a particular bugbear with because at the moment, so up until the end of last season, the way the rules were, it was a maximum sort of green flag race time of 2 hours. However, if the race was red flag, race suspended, then that would be added to the 2 hour limit, but it was capped at 4 hours. So, and this came about because we had that famous race, 2011 Canada, where the race was stopped for over 2 hours because of rain, and eventually it finished 4 hours, 4 minutes. So they capped it. They then decided, okay, we need to close this down to 4 hours. That time limit has now been reduced to 3 hours. So basically, if we have a race stoppage of anything longer than an hour, it's going to start eating into the 2 hour green flag time limit. My concern with this is this could possibly affect decisions by race control, by the race director, if it's getting close in terms of getting a race complete on time, getting it within the 75% limit for full points. We've had a couple of races, Hodders, in the past where the race has taken just over 3 hours to complete. This I can't understand the logic behind this rule change.
I'm as confused as you are, and I think, as you said, the real problem in knocking it down to 3 is if that 3 hours is set in stone, that's going to cause serious problems if we have a red flag because of an accident, and then potentially the heavens open. That's going to cause some major problems.
Tyson, I think this has possibly come about because of the events at the Bahrain Grand Prix when the race was stopped for over an hour. Now, because it was a dry race, the actual race itself was completed in about an hour and 40 minutes, so not too much of an issue there. But I think, as Hodders is saying, if we have a race where there are big accidents, there's rain, There's damage to the tyre barriers, etc. This is going to cause a few problems.
Yeah, I can sort of understand it from a TV standpoint. They want to fit it into its designated slot and not go over. But at the same time, yeah, when it comes to the safety, they've got to do everything right.
Mm-hmm. Well, say hopefully we won't see any of these rushed decisions, because we don't want those where it affects the
Indeed.
safety. But also, we don't want these. I mean, how irritating would it be that a race gets cut at 3 hours when we're one lap short of the 75% race distance that allows full points to be awarded, and that potentially has an effect on the championship. So that's something that's we're going to need to keep an eye on. Now, a couple of changes to sort of the pre-race procedure, in that the tyres must now be fitted at a 5-minute signal rather than 3 minutes, and also the tyre blankets have to be disconnected from the heaters at the same time at the 5-minute signal. Now, that is effectively going to mean that those tyres are going to be nowhere near as warm by the start of the formation lap, because I mean, yes, the blankets will be on them to keep them relatively warm, but they'll still lose a lot of temperature in that 5 minutes. Hodders, what do you think?
Again, it's one of those changes that's going to be very interesting to see how it works in practice. I mean, the last thing you want is to be starting a race on cooler tyres.
Mm-hmm. Tyson, would it be fair to say? I mean, I'm just wondering. I think the ruling, especially in regards to the blankets, I think it's come because you think at the 1 minute signal, everyone has to start clearing off the grid, and if those tyre blankets get all tangled up, which can happen, it's like the mechanics have to be off the grid at the 15-second signal. So 45 seconds to get those tyre blankets all disconnected and away from the car. That could be the reason why they're saying that they want it off the grid a lot earlier before.
Yeah, it could be. And I think it's going to add a different dynamic to the start, because one of the things I like about Formula 2, they don't let them use tyre blankets. So you've got people coming out on cold tyres. That's what we're going to start to see now. People are going to have to warm those tyres up, get them in the operating window.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Yeah, it's that formation lap now has a lot more importance
Yeah.
in getting those, cool, tyres that are, they won't be great to use on any racetrack, and up to that sort of 80, 100 degrees temperature where they're in their operating window. A little change, and I've very rarely seen this sort of thing change. So if the rain starts after the 7-minute signal, that will be an aborted start, and they'll basically go through the process again. The only time I can remember this happening was Brazil 2008, when everyone had dry tyres fitted, and literally 3 minutes to go, it threw it down. And of course, at that point, you can't change the tyres. So of course, they said, no, we'll abort the start. So again, that's something rare, but it's something just to be mindful of. Other changes. Scrutineering on Friday morning. Now, this is going to really affect the teams, because usually on the Thursday, the teams will set the cars up. They'll go to the scrutineering bay at either the beginning or the end of the pit lane, check the cars are all valid, and everything's all good to go. This time, it's got to happen on the Friday. So, scrutineering Friday morning instead of Thursday, and this has to be completed 1 hour and 30 minutes before first practice. And just to make it more complicated, because of the curfew, which we'll go into a little bit more, the Friday curfew ends 4 hours before practice 1. So they've got 2.5 hours to make any last-minute changes they feel need to be made, wheel the car down to scrutineering, get it checked, and wheel it back. And I think it's understandable, pushing a car down up or down the pit lane, physically pushing it, getting it onto the scrutineering bay and getting all checked. That's a long time. So this is going to be interesting to see how well this works. It may well be that the teams are going to work flat out on the Thursdays to get the car ready. So literally by the time they're allowed to get into the pit lane, straight to scrutineering, get it signed off, job done. Hodders, what's your thoughts?
It's certainly going to make things tight, particularly with the scrutinying on Friday morning. That's going to mean less time for, well, amending any technical difficulties. Again, we hope it doesn't cause any adverse problems to teams, but again, it's that wonderful thing of time management, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the FA are trying to obviously limit the amount of time the mechanics are in the paddock because they're aware that it's a very, very busy schedule. Yeah, Tyson, I can understand the cost cutting, the reducing the workload, but Tyson are effectively what they're doing is compressing more work into a smaller time frame, aren't they?
That's what it feels like. Yeah, it means they're going to have to get everything right on the Friday.
Absolutely. And also just a couple of notes on this. So the bodywork specifications are frozen on the Friday. Once the car's been scrutinized, they can't make any changes to the bodywork. They're allowed to test any new parts on the Fridays, but they can't use them Saturday or Sunday. And I said this is part of a cost-cutting measure and reducing the workload on the mechanics. Something else. Cars are in Parc Fermé from practice 3 now. This is a big, big change. So previously, the cars were in the Parc Fermé lockdown, i.e. you couldn't make any changes before the start of the race from when the car left the pit lane to start qualifying 1. Now, it's once the car leaves the pit lane in practice 3 or at the end of the practice 3, if they don't go out, that car is in Parc Fermé. Tyson, it's going to mean that if the teams have any problems in practice 3, they are stuffed.
Yeah, practice 1 and practice 2 are going to be a little bit more important now to work out what they want to do.
And Hodders, it's going to mean that if any cars have any technical problems or any meetings with the tyre barriers, that is effectively qualifying over for them, and they're starting from the pit lane.
Exactly. It's going to certainly drastically affect their weekend if that happens.
So, Hodders, are we likely to see less running in practice 3 as a result of this? Because the mechanics won't want to cause problems with the cars?
I mean, particularly the Part 5A change, I think I could see that happening. I think it may well be that 1 and 2 are the running and potentially being used as a diagnostic run as well to allow for any troubleshooting to be done in practice 3.
Absolutely. And yeah, so just clarifying here. So Parc Fermé now starts when the car leaves the pit lane in practice 3, or obviously at the end of practice 3 if they don't leave. And the cars will be completely sealed 3.5 hours after the end of qualifying. So that is literally, those big blankets over the cars, connected to the heaters, and they have the sort of little CCTV cameras inside, so they can't make any changes to the car without being spotted, basically. And then the cars are unsealed 5 hours before the start. So yeah, it will literally be, the changes will be made right up until the end of the Friday practice, which is going to be put more importance on them. So we'll see what happens there. Curfew change, I didn't mention this. So last year the curfew was that team personnel associated with the actual running of the car were not allowed into the paddock until 3 hours before the start of practice, and that was for Friday and Saturday, and that was an 8-hour curfew period, so they had to be out of the paddock by then. So for this year, it's a lot different. So for Friday, there's a 13-hour curfew, which ends 4 hours before the start of practice 1. So say practice starts at 11 a.m. on Friday, it means the mechanics have got to be out of the paddock by 6 p.m. and they're not allowed back in until 7 a.m. For Saturday, 9.5-hour curfew, which ends 3 hours before practice 3. So again, assuming practice 3 is an 11 a.m. start, the mechanics have to be out of the paddock, not the pit lane, completely out of the paddock by 10:30 p.m. and they're not allowed back in until 8 a.m. Hoddles, I'll come to you. It sounds a lot to compute, but that is really going to put a lot of stress and strain on the mechanics.
Agreed, and as we mentioned at the almost top of the shop with this podcast as well, it's going to be interesting to see what the effects are mentally on the mechanics as well. Particularly with mental well-being is a big hot topic at the moment.
Absolutely. Tyson, they are allowed, I think, either one or two jokers, as we call them. So allowed to break these curfews on 2 occasions. It'll be interesting to see how well this works. And as Hodders is saying, the teams need to be aware of the mental health. They need to make sure that the mechanics are not being overworked and overpressured.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's going to feel like crunch time for them with the limited amount of time they've got.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, we've seen these mechanics work miracles. Often they can, replace an engine on the Formula One car in under an hour, which is ridiculous. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with these curfew changes. And a few little bits. So the support series, and I'm really excited about this. So the W series, the women's series, so a motor racing series that is for women's drivers only. That's going to be coming in to support the Formula One race weekend. And the Formula 2 and Formula 3 will support the Formula 1 series on alternating weekends. Tyson, I'll come to you first. A great platform for the W Series to grow, and for drivers to potentially be to put themselves on the main stage for potential drives.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed the 2019 W Series. It opened my eyes to a lot of these female drivers that I wasn't aware of before.
Mm-hmm.
And now that it's supporting the F1 race weekend, they're going to be right there in front of the teams, so they're going to have a lot of time to scout.
Mm-hmm. And Hollers, obviously we've chatted about this. The W Series, it's they're Formula 3 standard cars that I use, but they are absolutely identical. The drivers move, they don't have the same mechanics every weekend, so it is a pure driving talent. This series.
It is entirely pure driving, and looking at the field for this year, it is a very, very solid field. Not just those who've been in before, but those who are joining for the first time. I think we're going to have a very high quality season. Mm-hmm. And it is wonderful to see it supporting Formula One essentially on the level. That's equality moving forward.
Absolutely, a very good point there. And if you haven't seen any of the W Series racing from the 2019 series, all of the races in full are available on YouTube, so you can go and find it on there. And Formula 2 and Formula 3 are going to alternate on race weekends supporting Formula 1. Is that a good move, Hodders?
It's an interesting one. I mean, I think some of it is a cost-cutting measure, which in the current economic climate is acceptable, but I don't see it being a huge problem because I would say variety is the spice of life. Having it on alternate weekends might also mean that those who would previously have been unable to potentially see both because of scheduling conflicts will now have a chance to see both on alternating weekends for a bit of variety.
Absolutely. And Tyson, we often see a lot of really close racing. The future of motorsport coming through these 2 series. So this is something that fans should be watching.
Oh yeah, with it being a spec series, you get much closer racing.
Often with interesting results. Couple more things. Last couple of things to go through. So the pre-season testing, they've only got 3 days. So it's going to be the 3-day test at Bahrain the week before the race. This again is really going to put the teams under pressure because the drivers are restricted to 12 hours of testing across these 3 days. So of course, if they have a technical problem, that is going to cripple them ahead of the opening race. Hodders, what do you reckon?
Absolutely. The pre-season testing being reduced is definitely going to cause major problems if there are difficulties. It does mean that they're going to have to iron out problems very quickly and find solutions with haste.
And Tyson, could this mean that potentially we could have an upset on our hand for the opening couple of races if teams do have reliability problems?
It's very possible. They're going to have to fix any issues instantly.
Mm-hmm. But I suppose also this is really good logistically because instead of for the British teams, for example, they've got to fly to Spain, observe the isolation period, then do their testing, then fly either back to base or straight to Bahrain, observe any isolation period there. They've got everything there. They don't have to worry about all the logistics from going from testing to the race circuit, which is really good. And the last bit, and I think this is nice, sensible. The races will now start on the hour. So previous 2 or 3 seasons, they've started at 10 past the hour. Now it'll be a case of on the hour, the lights will grow green for the formation lap. I think that's a fairly simple one, guys. Anything else that you want to talk about, Tyson? I'll come to you first. Anything that we should be looking at?
I'm just hoping for a really good season.
Absolutely. And Hodders?
I'm the same. I'm looking forward to this season. I'm very much looking forward to having the support series on the same weekend as well, because it means more racing is available to watch, which may well introduce fans to something new, and you can never knock that. And I just hope that we have a season that, touch wood, will be crossing over between pandemic and post-pandemic, and we might even get some spectators in later in the season. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if we can have the spectators in the stands, because it always adds to that atmosphere. Hodders, Tyson, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Thank you to everyone who has watched or listened to this podcast. We're going to look to do another one probably in or around the Bahrain Grand Prix, either after testing or after the first race. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and we will speak to you all again soon.